Have you ever wondered why the silence after betrayal feels louder than any scream? It seeps into the small hours of the night, curling under doors and into bedrooms where men once believed themselves invincible. There is a kind of man who imagines his infidelity will vanish as easily as his whispered promises, who believes the woman he deceived will always stand waiting, arms open, heart foolish enough to forgive before it even knows the full weight of what's been lost. He counts on her softness, her gentle spirit, her history of bending so far backward just to keep his comfort intact. But betrayal changes something fundamental in her. It burns away the haze of affection, scorches every illusion, leaving a sharper, colder edge in its place. You may not recognize it at first. Maybe because he still laughs too easily at dinner parties, or kisses you on the forehead with an absent tenderness. Perhaps it's the way he continues to post photos of you both on social media, curating a fantasy that even he begins to believe again. But underneath, something darker stirs, a restless guilt gnawing at his insides. For in quiet moments, when the phone stops buzzing, when the bar closes, when the other woman's perfume has faded from his skin, he is alone with the truth of what he's done. Alone with the knowledge that if love was ever pure, he himself poisoned it. Watch closely. In the mornings, he rises and glances at your side of the bed with an odd flicker of dread. You think he's merely tired. But there is a tightening in his chest, a dread that today might be the day you finally look at him differently. That today, your smile will be hollow, your eyes measuring, your warmth replaced by a stillness that terrifies him.
Men like this live of your emotional sun.
They feed on your radiance to disguise their rot. So when your brightness begins to dim, not from cruelty, but from self-preservation, he feels it as a wound. There is a peculiar irony here. The very man who once sought conquest outside his vows, who longed to feel powerful in secret moments of lust, becomes a frightened boy when faced with the collapse of the life he thought was guaranteed. He might not admit it. Pride forbids such vulnerability. Yet his actions betray him. The small gifts that suddenly appear on your nightstand. The texts that grow oddly tender, laced with urgency. The way he watches you when he thinks you aren't paying attention, trying to read if there's still hope tucked somewhere behind your quiet eyes. Some women, after betrayal, unravel into a desperate plea for reassurance. They drown themselves in asking why her, why me, why wasn't I enough? But there exists another kind of woman, rarer, carved from a deeper shadow. This woman does not beg. She does not wail. She simply observes. She gathers every inconsistency, every lie glossed over with boyish charm, and lets it etch itself into her bones until there is no room left for delusion. And while he paces the corridors of his own guilt, fumbling to mend the fracture he created, she is already learning how to live without him. You might be her. Or you might become her, when the weight of heartbreak finally shifts from agony to apathy. It's an evolution he never anticipates. He expects your tears, your trembling need for closure, the monologues of pain he can deflect with tired apologies. But he is wholly unprepared for your indifference. For your slow retreat into your own sovereignty. Because once a woman stops seeking explanations and starts choosing silence, it is the cruelest mirror a cheating man will ever face. In that mirror, he is forced to see himself stripped of excuses, stripped of charm, only a small selfish thing that squandered devotion for the sake of momentary pleasure. It begins there, in the subtle spaces between your words, in the calm way you lay beside him without reaching for his hand. And though he pretends not to notice, he is haunted by the possibility that you have already left him in every way that matters. He tells himself it's only a phase. That in time, your tenderness will return, soft as before, eager to forgive. Because hasn't that always been your pattern? He relies on memory more than reality now, the memory of how you once looked at him as if he were the axis of your world. How you covered your own small aches just to cradle his pride.
How you absorbed every slight, every subtle betrayal, juste to keep the fragile illusion alive.
But memory is a liar when guilt is your guide. It shows you only the golden hours, never the storm clouds creeping in behind. Meanwhile, something ancient wakes inside you. It is neither rage nor bitterness, though he might mistake it for that.
No, isolde, a kind of kiesevring.
A sacred instinct that whispers there is more dignity in distance than in begging a man to value what he carelessly risked. So you move differently now. Slower, deliberate, your presence less accessible. You still smile, but it is a private smile, turned inward. You still speak, but your voice carries a coolness that tells him some doors inside you have closed forever. He notices. Of course he does. Cheating men have an uncanny sensitivity to shifts in a woman's spirit. It frightens him more than any shouting match ever could. Because rage he can handle, it is loud, messy, often desperate, and easily pacified by cheap apologies. But your composure?
Your calme?
It unsettles something primal in him. It says you are no longer playing the game he depended on to soothe his own guilt. It says you have slipped beyond his reach. And what of him truly? Behind closed eyes at night, when the adrenaline of his clandestine adventures has faded, when the thrill of secrecy has soured into shame, what does he feel? There is a gnawing fear that grows sharper each time he catches you laughing at something that doesn't involve him. Each time your phone lights up and your smile is faintly secretive, he wonders if karma has already found him in the shape of another man's interest. It claws at him. Because deep down, even the most arrogant betrayer knows, loyalty once betrayed, rarely returns to its original form. Do you know how many men lie awake, replaying the careless moments that led to this? The text messages sent in dim-lit rooms, the half-truths told at the dinner table, the way he shrugged off your suspicions with practiced ease. All of it comes roaring back when he sees you slip quietly into your own power. And though he may not confess it, he is haunted by the thought that he traded something sacred for something shallow. That he lost not just your trust, but the gentle refuge of being loved without conditions. There are nights he reaches for you, hoping physical closeness might rebuild what his betrayal shattered. His hand drapes across your hip, tentative, almost pleading. Sometimes you let him. Sometimes you don't. Either way, he senses the truth, that what was once instinctive has become a choice for you now. You decide when he may be close, if at all. And that subtle reversal of power is a torment he will carry long after he believes he's moved on. Few women understand the potency of withdrawing affection in quiet dignity. It is not revenge in the vulgar sense. There are no scenes, no smashed glasses, no public humiliations. It is simply the slow starvation of a man's ego, left to wander in the vast silence where once your constant warmth lived. And as he paces that emptiness, inventing fantasies of your forgiveness, you are already building something new inside yourself, something no apology of his can touch. If he ever wonders what a man truly feels after betraying you, let him taste this delicate terror, the realization that he is no longer the sun in your sky, but merely a faded constellation, pretty from a distance, but cold, unreachable, and inconsequential to the woman you are becoming. It is in the quiet hours of dawn that his thoughts turn most viciously against him. When the house is still, the bed beside him half empty of your energy, he lies awake tracing phantom patterns on the sheets. He replays every moment he thought was harmless, the flirtations he excused as trivial, the secrets he tucked away in late-night text threads, the lies he wore like a second skin. Now, they gather around him like ghostly witnesses, reminding him of what he carelessly risked. He might try to dismiss it all with practiced logic. Men like him often do. They tell themselves it wasn't serious, that temptation is simply woven into the male fabric. That as long as he returned home provided, played the dutiful partner on the surface, he had done no real harm. But the human heart is not so easily deceived. Especially his own, now battered by the echo of your absence, even though you still stand there in the same kitchen, pour coffee into the same cups. It is your gaze that has changed, the quiet that has changed, the subtle recoil of your body when he reaches for you. And that, more than any accusation, is what pierces him. Some nights he catches a glimpse of you standing by the window, bathed in a pale wash of moonlight, lost in thoughts that do not include him. There is a regal stillness in your silhouette, a self-possession that is almost holy. It terrifies him because it is unfamiliar. You were once so easily read, your joys and sorrows offered up like open palms. Now there is a gatekeeper inside you, a silent sentry who decides what he is permitted to see, what fragments of you are still his to hold. Most men will never admit how deeply this cuts them. How it breeds a low, relentless panic that perhaps you are already gone in all the ways that count. And you, do you feel it too? That slow unraveling of old ties, the delicate untangling of your spirit from the shared history you thought was unbreakable? Maybe you stand under the shower some mornings, letting the water mask your tears, unsure if you mourn him or simply mourn who you were before his betrayal found you. That tender, trusting woman who would have moved heaven and earth to shield his heart, never dreaming he might so carelessly discard hers. But grief is a strange alchemy.
Over time, it forge arde, clire corwisignou.
A knowing that no man, no matter how beloved, can be the sole custodian of your worth. He begins to see it in the way you answer him. Polite, measured, stripped of the eager warmth he once took for granted. It's there when you get dressed for dinner, more radiant than ever, but your beauty seems turned inward now, as if it exists purely for your own secret pleasure. He wonders if someone else might be the reason. His pride rebels at the thought, but deeper still lurks an ugly, helpless dread, that you have discovered joy beyond his orbit. Irony is cruel, isn't it? That the man who chased fleeting thrills outside your bond is now haunted by visions of your life without him. He imagines strangers catching your smile, your laughter filling spaces he no longer occupies. He pictures your phone lighting up with messages he will never read, hands brushing yours under tables he will never sit at. And though he tries to smother it with bravado, the truth remains, he shattered something irreplaceable. Now he must live with the echo of what it cost. Yet through all this, you continue forward. Sometimes haltingly, sometimes with bold new strides, but always forward. Because somewhere along this bruising journey, you began to understand, forgiveness is not always for him. Sometimes it is a private ceremony, a gentle release of the chains that once bound your happiness to his flawed character. And in that letting go, whether you choose to stay or to walk away, there is a soft, fierce revolution. The kind of freedom he will never truly taste. Most men will never confess the true weight of their remorse. Pride stands guard at their lips, muting every admission of weakness, every tremor of fear. But their bodies speak in subtle betrayals. The way his hands linger on your shoulder a beat too long, hoping to reclaim a closeness that has slipped through his fingers. The restless tapping of his foot under the dinner table when your smile drifts somewhere far from him. The searching glance he gives you across crowded rooms, as if trying to decipher whether your laughter still belongs to him or if it's already dancing toward someone else. He finds himself fixating on small details. The new perfume that lingers on your neck, is it simply your evolution, or a quiet rebellion meant to remind him you are your own, untethered? The way you dress with a flourish of elegance that feels less like an offering to him and more like a coronation of yourself. These realizations arrive in hushed, private shocks that ripple through his chest. It dawns on him again and again that he is no longer the sole mirror by which you measure your beauty, your worth, your joy. In darker hours, regret curdles inside him. A bitter draught he is forced to sip alone. He might roll over in bed, curl toward your warmth, breathe in your scent and hope it grounds him in old certainties. But what meets him is a woman transformed, perhaps still tender, perhaps still patient, but unmistakably altered. Your silences are no longer invitations for him to fill with apologies or excuses. They are cathedrals of your own making, sacred spaces where he cannot tread. And you, yes, you who once lay awake counting all the ways you might have failed him, now rest easier, lulled by a new melody. It is the song of your own heartbeat unburdened by his failings. Of your breath deepening not with anxiety but with a strange, luminous peace. This shift confuses him, terrifies him, even. Because somewhere in his mind, he believed your love was a constant, like gravity, immune to the reckless forces he unleashed. Now he sees how wrong he was. Sometimes forgiveness arrives not as a soft embrace but as a quiet exodus. A choice to remain kind, even loving, yet to retreat so deeply into your own spirit that he can no longer reach the inner sanctum he once took for granted. And that, more than any vengeful act, breaks him. Because how does a man recover from realizing that his betrayal not only wounded you but permanently altered the shape of your devotion? He starts to haunt his own memories, wandering through old moments you shared.
The way you tilted your head when logging, your eyes closing with unguarded delight.
The countless nights you fell asleep on his chest, trusting that it was a fortress against the world. He replays these recollections like sacred footage, hoping to resurrect the man he was when you loved him without suspicion. But nostalgia is a cruel mistress. It offers no absolution, only clearer evidence of how much he squandered. Meanwhile, you walk differently through life now. Perhaps still beside him, or perhaps alone, but always more sovereign than before.
Friends me notice, strangers me sense.
The subtle gravity that surrounds a woman who has survived betrayal and emerged cloaked in her own fierce clarity. It is not bitterness, it is simply an untouchable knowing. You have stood at the edge of heartbreak's dark chasm, peered into its hungry mouth, and stepped back whole. This becomes his deepest torment, that while he remains ensnared by the consequences of his own choices, wrestling shadows of guilt and yearning, you are already building gardens from the ashes. Smiling at yourself in the mirror with a tenderness that requires no audience. Laughing in rooms where he is not the center. Loving yourself in ways he never quite mastered. And should he reach for you now, trembling beneath the veneer of composure, he will find that what was once his refuge is now your private temple. A sanctuary where he may stand on the threshold, but whose door he no longer possesses the keys to unlock. There comes a moment, inevitable and sharp, when he finally understands the true shape of his loss. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or drama. Rather, it arrives in small, devastating certainties, in the realization that your laughter rings brighter when it isn't filtered through his presence, that your steps carry a grace unanchored by the burden of his needs. He watches you move through your days with a lightness that once belonged to his domain, and something inside him folds under the weight of that revelation. He may try, in subtle ways, to reclaim what he forfeited.
A sudden bouquet of your favorite flowers on ordinary Wednesday.
Tickets to a play you mentioned months ago, hoping you be touched by his attention. Perhaps he lingers in doorways, eyes soft with old affection, as if willing you to close the distance by instinct. But love does not spring obedient from the ground once trampled. Trust does not unfurl at the snap of regret's fingers. And you have learned to keep your heart behind gentle walls, not out of cruelty, but from a necessary reverence for your own peace. Sometimes he dreams of you. Dreams where you are laughing, arms open, eyes bright with the same tender devotion you once lavished on him without question. He wakes breathless, reaching across the sheets only to find emptiness where your warmth should be. In these moments, the hollow echo of his own making becomes deafening. The very silence he once wielded to conceal his transgressions now rises up against him, wrapping around his throat like a noose. And how strange it is, this reversal of power. Once he stood so certain, so casually assured of your unwavering affection. Now he trembles in the quiet, haunted by visions of a future in which your love is given freely to another. A man who has never tasted the bitterness of your tears, who meets you clean, without the grime of betrayal smudging his hands. The image tortures him more thoroughly than any punishment you could devise. But you, in your quiet evolution, do not plot revenge. There is no need. Your very indifference is a blade sharp enough to bleed him. Each time you choose your own joy over ruminating on his guilt, each time you step into the sun untouched by his shadow, you carve another mark into the architecture of his regret. It is not malicious. It is simply the natural consequence of a heart reclaiming itself. There may be tender days, memories that wash over you with an ache that is almost sweet. You might recall the softness in his voice during late-night confessions, the way his hand fit around yours as if made for it. Love does not vanish cleanly. It fades in overlapping waves, sometimes receding so far you believe it gone, only to surge back in quiet hours with a ghost's caress. But even these moments do not tempt you back into the old cage. You have outgrown its confines, your spirit stretched too vast to ever shrink itself for his comfort again. And so the story drifts toward its silent climax. Not with grand gestures or fiery confrontations, but in the steady rhythm of days that no longer revolve around his orbit. He learns, slowly and too late, that the most devastating consequence of betrayal is not your anger, it is your emotional absence. Your laughter that no longer seeks him out. Your eyes that no longer light with longing at his touch. The delicate, final mercy of your heart closing its doors and locking them from within. Perhaps he will carry this lesson forward, raw and ragged, into whatever new chapters await him. Perhaps he will become a better man, forged by the hollow left in your wake. Or perhaps he will stumble on as before, chasing hollow distractions to fill the spaces where your radiance once lived. That is his path to walk, tangled and uncertain. But you stand reborn. Whether forgiveness drapes itself around your shoulders like a gentle shawl, or vengeance cools your veins into a quiet, sovereign frost, you are free. And in the end, that is the truest story of all. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.